Hello, and welcome to Thermal Detonators for Dummies. I mean, welcome to Bob's Dungeon. My name is Bob, and I'll be your host. And in case you haven't figured it out yet, in this video we're going to be talking about thermal detonators and how they will absolutely end your role-playing game. Now, the first time we ever heard of thermal detonators in the Star Wars universe was in Return of the Jedi. And the way they were introduced was Leia disguised herself as a bounty hunter known as Bosch. And to get into Jabba's palace, she brought Chewbacca in to collect the bounty on him as part of her cover. And she demanded an exorbitant amount of credits, and Jabba refused to pay. So she pulls out a thermal detonator with a dead man switch on it, and everybody freaks out and dives for cover and is terrified of the thermal detonator. Apparently they are a horrifying weapon, so Jabba's response to this is he just laughs and makes her a counter offer. And she accepts, and they take Chewbacca away, and she's able to mingle amongst Jabba's throne room so that later on she can rescue Han. And that was the first time we heard about thermal detonators in Star Wars. Now, I can't remember exactly if thermal detonators showed up in any of the novels or series after that. Now, I do believe they got mentioned, but I don't believe we ever saw exactly what they can do. But they were in the role-playing games, and you could get them and use, and they were very illegal. So I'm going to tell a couple of stories of how thermal detonators ended a couple of games I ran. But first, let's take a look at just what a thermal detonator can do in the various games that have come out of Star Wars over the years. I have taken some notes. Now, we're going to start by looking at what the thermal detonators can do in the D6 system by West End Games, because that was the first iteration of the Star Wars role-playing game to come out. Now, the scale of the weapon is, of course, character scale. The skill that was required so you can use it accurately is grenade. The ranges for the thermal detonator is 3 to 4 meters, 7 meters, and 12 meters. The blast radius is 2 meters, 8 meters, 12 meters, and 20 meters at the most. The damages for those radiuses is 10d6, 8d6, 5d6, and 2d6. And the cost for a thermal detonator, it's going to set you back about 2,000 credits. Then we jump ahead to the first version of the D20 rules by Wizards of the Coast. The range for the thermal detonators is 4 meters with a complete radius of 8 meters. The damage is 46 meters for the 4 meter range and 2d6 for the 8 meter range. And again, it's only going to set you back 2,000 credits. In the revised version, only one thing changes about the thermal detonator, and that is you can crit on a 20 with the thermal detonator. In the Saga edition of the Star Wars role-playing game, also put out by Wizards of the Coast, the blast radius of the thermal detonator is 4 squares for the blast radius, and a square is worth 1.5 meters. So we're roughly looking at about 8 meters. The damage for it is 8d6, and again, it's only 2,000 credits. And finally, we come to Fantasy Flight Games' version of the Star Wars role-playing game. The skill that is required for it is ranged light. The damage for the thermal detonator is 20, and it's got a crit of 2. The range is short, and again, it's only 2,000 credits. So about the only thing consistent in these different versions of the game is that it's going to set you back 2,000 credits. Now, as you can see by looking at different values, the thermal detonator is most dangerous in Western Games' D6. And that's the way it should be. Very dangerous. Everybody's terrified of it, and that's why it's illegal. And in comparison, everything put out by Wizards of the Coast involving the thermal detonator is really kind of weak. I mean, you should not be able to shrug off a thermal detonator. Maybe at max range, but... And Fantasy Flight Games, I haven't really played it at all, so I really don't know just how diddly it is. So, that's a look at the thermal detonators, so you can see what we're dealing with. Both of my stories that I'm going to tell use the D6 system from West End Games. Ironically, I never had a thermal detonator come up in running the Wizards of the Coast version of Star Wars, the D20. And like I said, I have not run the Fantasy Flight Games due to lack of players, so I really can't say anything on it. So, my first story takes place a long time ago, and in it, I had this player that wanted to play an Ugnaught. That's all he wanted. He just wanted to play an Ugnaught, and was just really weird about playing an Ugnaught. Had another character play a Gamorrean, and my third player in this game was playing a human. And they were all on Bespin, and I cannot remember exactly how he got it, but the Ugnaught came up with a thermal detonator. And they were in the process of stealing a shuttle so they can go out and live the life as smugglers or pirates or something. I can't remember. This game took, when I ran it, it was like 25, 30 years ago. But anyway, they were in the process of stealing the ship, and they got aboard the ship, and security shows up. So the way they dealt with it was the Ugnaught gave the Gamorrean guard the thermal detonator and told him not to use it, just threaten them with it and they should run off. Well, the Gamorrean goes out there and he actually used the thermal detonator, blew himself up, blew up all the guards, blew up the ship, blew up the other two characters that were on the ship. Ended the campaign there, right then and there. Ironically, that was the first gaming session. So, one gaming session, whole thing's over. Thank you, thermal detonators. Second story I have, I've told before, I believe, but I'm going to tell it again because it is relevant. It was my first foray into LARPing, live action roleplay. And I had just gotten the rules for the live action Star Wars rules put out by West End Games, and I'd found a group to play. Well, one of my friends was being an assistant game master with me so that he could help play some of the NPCs. And the setup was they were to meet this scientist, I think he was an archaeologist, and he had a mission for him, and there was a bunch of illegal stuff going on. All the players were playing criminal types. We had a smuggler, we had a drug dealer, we had a bounty hunter, and it was just really, really weird. So anyway, my assistant game master was playing a guard, and he thought it would be neat if his guard had a thermal detonator. And at first I didn't want to do that, but he talked me into it. Bad move. So as we were playing, the whole thing started breaking down and it turned into a hostage situation. And in order to bring calm to everybody, my assistant, who was playing the guard, pulls out the thermal detonator and switches it on with the dead man's handle and was telling everybody to calm down, and somebody shot him. And he drops the thermal detonator. The thermal detonator goes off, killing him, the hostage, the person holding the hostage, and all of the players except for the person that shot him, who was at maximum range and took minimal damage. Suffice to say, game over in the campaign, and that was my first and last foray into live action role playing. And those are two examples of why you should never allow thermal detonators to be used by the player characters in games at all. Granted, in the second story, it was an assistant game master, but it might as well have been a player. Now, like I said, in the West End games, the thermal detonators were vicious and truly lived up to the horror that the name inspires in the Star Wars universe. When Wizards of the Coast did Star Wars, thermal detonators were kind of nerfed really hard, and it's basically something you could kind of shrug off if you got a few levels under your belt. And that just really takes the fear out of a thermal detonator. And I really can't say much for Fantasy Flight Games because, like I said, I've not really got the chance to play it, even though it's been out for years now. So anyway, thank you for joining me at talking about thermal detonators in the Star Wars universe. And remember that if you use thermal detonators in your Star Wars game, allow your players to use them, then you are the dummy. Thank you for listening, and hopefully you'll join me next time, where we'll talk about something else. Bye.